Well, hello friends, I'm David Vos. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. Well, today friends, wanted to talk about a lot of things. This is a continuation in part on that series that we were doing, and it's taken me a while to get back to this. There's a lot of things going on with YouTube, but I'm going to do my best to do this, continue this series. The series on what can we do? Who's running the show? Why are we here? What can we do to combat all this bad stuff in the world? And, we talked about the maritime law. And I know a lot of you were interested in that. And I discussed how we are under that law. But this all really goes back to the law of Moses. So it is so deep because there's been so much confusion. Most of us as Christians kind of know the Bible. It was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Some of us don't even know, if Abraham was before Moses or who was Enoch. Was that before the flood? There's a lot of stuff that the average Christian probably is not familiar with because they don't read the Bible that much. But a lot of Christians know pretty well. They know their Bible and that history. But we don't know history, actual, historians who wrote the history of the Egyptian peoples, the Babylonians. We don't know history except from one angle. And it turns out that all the history books are the same. And they all teach the same history. But we haven't been familiar with general history, general ancient history, so that we can't put it together with the Bible. And we've been duped by a lot of this stuff. Because you need to know all this history, because you need to know, well, first of all, we didn't know, as Christians, that when Jesus came along, he was saying that the Old Testament is not good. That wasn't his father. And he told the Jews, he told the Sanhedrin, the scribes and the Pharisees, your God's the devil. And he never mentioned Yahweh. He never worshipped Yahweh. I've got lots of videos that go into this. And I'm going to go over this very, very sketchy in this video because I want to get into some things that are even more interesting about this particular situation. We talked about cosmology. We talked about astrology. We talked about the history of the Egyptians and how Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were the first pharaohs of Egypt. And we talked about how Joseph married into the line of On, which the Greeks call Heliopolis. But the word On there, the city of On, is the same as the Sumerian An or Anu. And that is the king, priest gods that ruled the world. Now, one of these king priest gods that came down after Joseph and the Israelites went into Egypt was Akhenaten. Akhenaten ruled. He had a funny head. If you look at that picture, you'll notice that there are some people on the earth that don't look quite human. One of these unhuman-looking alien things had the name of Akhenaten. So, really what I want to talk about, I suppose, is Akhenaten today. Who was Akhenaten? I'm going to show you that Akhenaten was Moses. And I'm going to show you that he was not human. And I'm going to show you a lot of stuff about this that's probably going to, if your mind wasn't blown away by some of the stuff we've already been learning, it's going to be blown away today. And for a lot of you, it's going to upset the entire apple cart. And at first, it's going to bring up a lot of questions, but it's going to answer the questions if you'll just give it time. This information that I'm presenting today is going to really put a lot of the pieces together. If you'll meditate on these things and start going over the things that you've known all your life, some of the things you've known all your life, that really kind of like little missing pieces in your mind. You weren't able to understand it all. Like, why was this God so mean and angry and, killing everybody? Oh, well, he was the devil. Okay, that's what Jesus said. Jesus said that any man who ever came before him was a thief and a robber. Well, that means Moses. So, that's why Jesus never said in the law or my law. If Christians are correct, most Christians today think that Jesus gave the law. They think Jesus was the God of the Old Testament, came down in the flesh. So it was his law, but he didn't say that to the Pharisees. He said, your God is the devil, and he said, your law. That's not my law. And you've never seen my Father. My Father is above, but your Father is beneath. So, we've talked about all this before. So, of course then, Akhenaten, what does that mean? Well, Aten is one of the gods of Egypt. And if you notice, all of the kings of Egypt, well, the kings of Babylon do this too. All the ancient kings had integrated into their name, it was a title, and they would use the names of the gods. We talked about Nebuchadnezzar and how the czars have ruled all over the world, and the Caesars, the Khazars, the czars of Russia, and the czars of Babylon. But that's part of the name, Nebuchadnezzar, Belteshazzar. But the first part, Bel, that's the name of one of their gods. Nebo was the name of one of their gods, Nebuchadnezzar. So here in the Egyptian lines, you've got Ra Moses or Ramses. That's Ra Moses. Ra is one of their gods, and Moses means their anointed prince. So the anointed prince of Ra. But they also had Moses or Thoth Moses. Because you see, there were king lines. The gods go back in history. Now, the first, way back, way before the flood, they've got Enoch. And of course that word, Enoch, is a word that incorporates two roots, An and Ki. An is heaven, that's Anu, and Ki means earth. That was his wife, so it was the marriage of heaven and earth. And so, there are lots of words that are derived from An and Ki. We have Enoch, who was the son of the gods. We have Cain, even, who was the son of Enoch. And there was another Enoch that we've got two different Enochs in the Old Testament. One who was in the line of Cain, and the other who is not in the line of Cain through Seth. But that goes back to Ankh, the Enoch, and Cain. And then we also have the sons of Anak that the Bible talks about. Those are the Anakim in the Bible, and in the Sumerian it's the Anunnaki. Okay? Anunnaki in Sumerian is from heaven to earth they came. So there's the heaven and there's the earth. But the general root, Ain and Ki, is just heaven and earth. So whenever there is something called Cain or Enoch or something of that nature, it goes back to that god Anu and Ki. So here we've got Akhenaten. Achen is the same root, is the same word from the same root that we just talked about. Achen or Cain, Achain or Enoch, it's all the same. Then the last part of the word Akhenaten is the Aten. Aten was one of the gods. There's lots of different gods, but they're all basically the same god in different forms. Because you see, take for instance, everybody knows that Ra is the sun god. We know how that comes to us today as radiation, the rays of the sun, the radius of a circle. All these words come from Ra. And even Or, which is the Hebrew word for light, comes from that word. Just O-R or R-A or whatever. It's the same word. And so then you've got the word Horus, the child of Ra. Well, Horus is the sun born at the horizon. Then you've got Set. Set is the sun setting, who we today has come down to us in many forms. Shaitan, Satan, Set. And then that is where we get the word Aten. Because you see, there's, like I said, there's Ra, there's Horizon, there's Set, and then there's some other gods that are on the other side of the wheel, such as Amun. Amun was a god that the Egyptians worshipped, or a god that they mentioned, but it's really the same word as our word moon. See, that's in the dark side of the wheel. Amun is the moon god. And it's kind of funny, but Christians are not aware that all of these gods are in our Bible. Been so mistranslated, and if I told you, most of you are not going to believe me, but you've got to do all the research yourself. The word Ammon, as the name of a god, is all the way through the Bible. I'm telling you, if you had a Bible that was translated correctly, you'd be able to see so many things. In our Bibles, it's translated the God of Truth. And it says, and they will do everything in the name of the God of Truth, all the way through the Old Testament. You're probably not familiar with that verse, but it's in there. In Deuteronomy and Numbers and all the way through Kings and Chronicles and the whole Old Testament, and it's even in the New Testament. And if you look at it in the Hebrew, it says the God Ammon. It doesn't say the God of Truth. But they didn't know what Ammon meant. It's a god of the Egyptians. They didn't like it in there if they did know about it. So they just said, well, let's just translate it. What does Ammon mean? And they made up a word, said, let's call it truth. But actually, Ammon doesn't mean truth. It really means, and may it be done. May it be finished. That's why we still use that word when we pray. And, there's nowhere in the New Testament or anywhere in the Bible where it says at the end of every prayer you've got to say amen. It doesn't say that. It does say in one verse that how will they say amen to one of your prayers if they don't know what you're saying? And there's other verses similar to that. But what does it mean? Well, you see, in the ancient world, they understood who the gods were. There's a cycle. It starts in Horus, the horizon. It rises and is exalted in Cancer, Ra. It sets in the autumn, or the Aten. And it goes down in the night, in the darkness at the bottom of the wheel. And then it goes to, it is finished. Amun, Atun. It's finished. It's autumn. It's tomb, the death of the tomb. The Adone, the Adon. That is the god at the base of the wheel. So, it's really saying the cycle is finished and we're ready for the rebirth again. Because Adone was the god of death and rebirth. It's not just the god of rebirth, but the god of death and rebirth. Death and rebirth. Adone. And this is why Jehovah is always paired up with that word Adonai in some places in the Bible, especially in Jeremiah. And a lot of times Jehovah is paired up with the word Elohim. And so you see the Jews say, well, see, our God is Elohim. But no, that's not what it's saying. It's saying I am, Jehovah means I am, it's a verb. I am Elohim. And it's saying Jehovah Adonai. I am Adonai. So Jehovah makes the claim that he is those gods. But in other places of the Bible, you get the impression that he's making the claim, but it's not true. Because it says, I am and there is none else. You will bow to me or I will wipe you off the face of the earth. I am, you will obey me. You will bow to no other. I am a jealous God. So you see, he's a God of pride. And he's constantly bragging about who he is, saying he is God. But he also says in Isaiah that he creates darkness. I create light and I create darkness. But you see, our Father in heaven doesn't create darkness. Because Jesus said his Father was from above. The Bible says there is no darkness in God, not the true God. The true divine being has no darkness, does not create darkness, has no wrath. There is no condemnation in us. We walk after the Spirit. So, these Egyptian gods all represent the cycles of life and death. And when Christ is born, he is the human being, that spiritual man that is born, and when the sun rises, everything gives life. And so Christ is that birth of that inner spiritual man in human beings. And that's at the beginning of the wheel on the horizon, which is Horus, which is also where we get the word hour. And Horus is the same word. If you drop the H, it's Ari or Aries or, hierarchy. This is the beginning of the kings, or the chief of the line of the kings, and this is where it starts with Horus. The hierarchy, the horoscope, starts with Horus, because that's the beginning of the wheel. So Jesus then is the same story of the birth of Horus that we read about in the Egyptian teachings. Well, remember, the Egyptian priesthood was the true priesthood. Remember, Joseph was the high priest, the king. And in Greek, his name was Joseph. And so Amun is one of the gods that they worshipped, and Amun-Hoseph is the Greek way of saying Amun-Hotep. Amun-Hotep I was Joseph. Amun-Hotep II was his son, and Amun-Hotep III was his great-grandson. Amun-Hotep III gave birth to Akhenaten. Akhenaten was originally called Amun-Hotep IV. Remember, Joseph, when he went down into Egypt, the children of Israel went down after him, and they were there for 500 years. And so it was about 4 generations of the Amun-Hotep line. And they worshipped under the name of Amun. And this is why even our King Solomon has that name. Sol is the sun, and Amun is the moon. See, it's the beginning and the end of the cycle. It's the sunshine and the moon. The sun and the moon, the beginning and the end. Jesus says, I am the beginning and the end. It is finished. Atun. Amen. And so, the priests of Egypt worshipped Ra, but they didn't worship them as gods. They understood that this was symbolic of the divine essence and the presence and the oneness of the universe, because the New Testament says that God is not a man, but he is spirit. God is in all, through all, above all. Astrology was only a way to understand the divine essence and how it came and gave its life through the sun, and then it died in the sky and was reborn again in spring. That's all this was. See, so what Christians claim pagans do, they're doing. The ancient pagans, that just means the ancient nations. That doesn't mean anything bad. It doesn't mean they're bad to call them pagans. The Bible doesn't use the word pagan in a derogatory means. It just says the other nations. Remember, Jehovah was the God of the Jews. He was the jealous God, the angry God. Said, now you cannot worship any other God. You can't go and study and learn and get knowledge. I forbid it. I will murder you. So the nations, they had this ancient priesthood that we're going to find out Moses had and brought in to Israel and veiled. And so the priesthood, they were worshiping various different manifestations of God and calling it different things, whether it was Horus or Ra or Amun. But something happened in around 1350 before Christ. This particular elongated skull man, Akhenaten, usurped the throne in Egypt. What happened was, as Amenhotep, the son of Joseph, Amenhotep III, he ended up marrying a woman called T. Now, T is a beautiful, interesting story. You probably heard of Tia-Tifi, who made a line of kings that they took a child of Tia-Tifi up into Europe and Britain. And the throne of Europe is related to Tia-Tifi. Well, Tia-Tifi is from T. T was the ancient priestess mother from Egypt, who is the mother of Moses. This is why she was so important. But who is T? Well, in all the languages, this means Mother Earth. This is the physical, the indigenous peoples of this world. So in Sumerian, we have the word ki, An ki. An is heaven, ki is earth. So in Greek, we have Gia. And, well, even in the Egyptian, we have Geb. And we have Nut. Nut is just the An. And Geb is the Ge, the Gi. And so that's the heaven and the earth, the original gods of Egypt. And so all of the ancient world has the same gods. But it's very difficult to trace all of them because the names change through different hierarchies, different nations and kingdoms. And we speak English now, so we don't speak any of those languages. But all of our words usually go back to the same roots. And you can identify these words, but it's very difficult to do. So T, then, is Mother Earth. Now, you probably by now have noticed that this Akhenaten looks an awful lot like somebody we know. Okay, he's been on the front page of Time magazine, the cover. Everybody has seen this comparison. Everybody knows that this ancient god Akhenaten looked exactly like Obama. But what's even more amazing is Akhenaten's mother, T, who looks exactly like Michelle Obama. A very dark-skinned woman with the high cheekbones, the epitome of Michelle Obama. And what's interesting is that Akhenaten was the first of the pharaohs that his body appears to be both male and female. He's got breasts, he's got wide hips, birthing hips, and a little belly like a woman would have there if they were pregnant. This is a sort of an androgynous being of both male and female, and yet it's got the head that looks like Obama. Notice that Obama is pushing this agenda of androgynous and homosexuality, and there's all this talk about Michelle Obama being a man. Well, this is very significant, friends, because this is telling us something. This age of Aten is not over. The age of Moses, because you'll find in history that Akhenaten was Moses. If you read and study the history of Akhenaten, who is Cain or Enoch's line through Cain, down to Atan, which is the word Satan, which is the end in the darkness of the bottom of the wheel. And it was this Akhenaten that came in the line of the king priests, but was sort of a usurper of that line. There's a whole story, we're going to go into all of that in this video, about how Moses was born and how Akhenaten was born. And it's the same child. So the story of Akhenaten is that his father Amenhotep III had some sons and some daughters. And he had an older son that should have been the ruler of Egypt to be his heir. But that child was the son of his sister. Okay, this is another place in the ancient writings where people get very confused. Amenhotep III didn't marry his sister. They weren't, as pharaohs weren't required to marry their sisters. They were required to marry someone related to them, closely related, to keep the bloodline pure. Not their sister, but probably a niece or someone, a cousin or something. And that they translate sometimes sister, but it doesn't mean sister. See, Abraham was one of these pharaohs. We talked about this in another video. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were the first pharaohs. And it says that Abraham married his sister, Sarah. Well, that wasn't his sister, because if you look in the Bible and you find out who Sarah was, she wasn't Abraham's sister. She was a closely related niece. So, sister doesn't mean literal sister. Well, if Amenhotep III had married his sister, well, he did. If the heir had been from her, from his relations, then it would have been the same king line. But it changed at this point. Akhenaten wasn't from his closely related family. But he took one of the peoples, of the native indigenous peoples, and her name was T. And if you look at her picture, you'll see that she looks exactly like Michelle Obama. And she was very African in her features, with the high cheekbones and the very dark skin. So you see, this is how it usually goes. The gods, or the king gods, were really humans that were the children of the gods, and they ruled over the world. This is what happened with Enoch. Enoch has the combination of An and Ki. So his mother was Ki, from the earth, from the indigenous peoples, but his father was from Anu, from heaven. So this is true of all of the great kings. Abraham, remember, he gave birth to Isaac by promise. His wife Sarah was too old to have children. She couldn't have children. So Isaac wasn't born by the physical normal way. Jesus was born of a virgin. And so Noah also, there was a talk of him being a child of the gods. Well, in this case, we've got the opposite. In this case, Moses was a child of the gods, but not of one of the good gods, because he was deformed. The Bible says that the Anunnaki, or the Anki, the Akhenaten, the Anki, who worshipped Atan, or the darkness, Satan, they wanted to usurp that line of kings. So they took one of the indigenous peoples, T, and they had a child with her. But the child was deformed. The Bible says that the children of the Anunnaki had 6 fingers and 6 toes, and they were very tall. They were deformed. And this is what you see. And this is real, friends. We have dug up some of these elongated skulls, these cone heads. There's 300 of them. I think they found 300 of them in Peru. They've done a DNA test on these bones, on these bodies that they've dug up, and the DNA is not human. And they say the DNA is so different from human that they would not be able to reproduce with humans. So what does this mean? We know that the Anunnaki took wives, all of whom they chose. They did breed with humans. So the elongated skulls are deformities. They're not either human nor are they Nibirian, but they are the offspring of the gods, and they are more or less giants, or the Anakim, and the Anakim are the children of Anak according to the Bible. That's word for word from the Bible, the sons of Anak. And that is the Hebrew way of saying Anaki, the Anunnaki, because in Hebrew they don't have the vowels, so you just have consonants, and you've just got the N and the K, and it's Anki or Anuki. And in Hebrew, if you put Kim on the N, it's plural. So Anakim was the plural. And it says they're the sons of Anak. So, history tells us there are two seedings of this planet. The original seeding of the planet was done by the Anunnaki, and the Sumerian tablets tell us that they did this because they wanted to have slaves, and they wanted to abuse human beings. They had no love for us. They got tired of working the ground and mining the earth, and they wanted to make slaves to mine the earth for them. So they did this. In our Bible it says that our Father in heaven created man and he made them perfect. He never made them slaves. He didn't curse them. He didn't place in the middle of his creation a tree of knowledge that he forbid us to eat. There wasn't any serpent trying to deceive us there or anything. He just said you can have all of the trees. You may eat from all knowledge and all wisdom and grow and have dominion over the world. But in the second chapter, Ea, the Sumerian god Yahweh, he comes along and he begins to form him from the dust of the earth, the carnal nature. He made the tree of knowledge and forbid man to eat from it. What he tried to do, it says there, when he, in his fury and in his wrath, he drove them out of the garden because they tried to get knowledge, to become like the gods. He wanted them to be slaves. He said, you will slave this earth. He says, woman, you're going to be slave to your husband. And Adam, you're going to be a slave to the ground. You're going to till the soil, like I said. So remember, whoever created this garden and put Adam there, brought him into this form, separated Adim, which was plural. Our Father in heaven made Adim plural, male and female created he them. They were both Adim. But Jehovah comes along and separates them. And the part that we call the woe man ate from the tree of knowledge and partook of that knowledge. And the serpent said, you'll become like God. And it says her eyes were opened and she became like God. That's what the scripture says. But then this God who told her, don't do this, he got mad. And in his wrath, he drove them out of the garden. Who is this God? Well, this God was pretty concerned with things that our Father in heaven is not concerned with. Number one, our Father in heaven is not wrathful. And he doesn't deny us knowledge. In fact, he sent his son Jesus, who told us we will live forever. And we will gain knowledge. And we will be like God. We will be one with him as he is one with the Father. What does one mean? In English, you could translate that the same. We're going to be the same as God. And Ephesians 3 says the fullness of God will dwell in us. Because you see, God's not a man. God is our consciousness, and we have that higher consciousness. We are gods, and Jesus said, ye are gods, and the scripture cannot be broken. But this God, Jehovah, Yahweh, Ea, he made this garden. You can read about it in the Sumerian tablets. He did a lot of things. One of the things it says in chapter 2 of Genesis is that describing this Eden that he created, he talked about these 4 rivers. And one of the rivers is Pison. And it says it encircles the whole land of Havilah. And the gold is good. What does Yahweh need gold for? Why, what's this reference here about the gold of Havilah? Well, if you look at chapter 25, verse 18 of Genesis, you'll see that Havilah is in Egypt. See, that's where they were mining the gold on the earth. And that's all Yahweh was interested in, is slaves. So he didn't want these slaves having knowledge. He wanted them to go down there and work the gold. He wanted slaves, and he created a law that said you're slaves. And he cursed us. And the Apostle Paul says the law is a curse. And so, it's a little mistranslated, because in our Bibles it says something like from Havilah to Shur. But Shur just means the wall. From Havilah all the way to the wall, which is in front of Egypt. That's what it says. In other words, all of Egypt, all the way to the wall or the barrier of Egypt. And so, the Bible's mistranslated. And if it weren't, you'd be able to understand things a little bit better. So all of this was going on before the flood. And Enoch was before the flood. Before Enoch, you had the Anunnaki that was started taking these indigenous peoples, marrying who they wanted, and the offspring were giants and couldn't breed with humans. They had these large elongated heads, the 6 fingers and 6 toes, some of them. They were deformed. That's all it means, is they were deformed. They weren't genetically the same. And so then along came Enoch. The story of Enoch is in the Sumerian tablets. It's in the book of Enoch. It's in the Bible. And it tells you he walked with God. They took him to Nibiru and taught him all of the ancient secrets and all of the ancient knowledge, and they made him the high priest so he could teach mankind these secrets. And so the pillar of Enoch, that's what they called the Great Pyramid, the Pillar of Enoch. The Great Pyramid is actually 10,000 years old. It's before the flood. It was actually created right about the time of the flood. And all the knowledge of Enoch and that great priesthood was put into that pyramid. So Enoch then was a particular person on the side of Seth that was taken to Nibiru and given all of this great wisdom. But you see, Jehovah didn't want that. Jehovah didn't want man knowing all of this great wisdom. So how then did Enoch get this knowledge? Well, Ea had a son named Ninningsida. This is the same character that the Egyptians called Thoth. And Thoth enlightened mankind. And he's the one who took Enoch to heaven and taught him all of this grand wisdom and incorporated this in this great priesthood. He's the one that the scripture says wrote the emerald tablets. He's the one who wrote the beautiful spiritual information that we have. The esoteric wisdom that's in the world was given to us by the gods. And this particular god, though he was a son of Enki or Ea or Jehovah, it's the same old story. He was born of a virgin. He was born in a miraculous way so that he could redeem the human race. Now, this is really all about the spiritual child that we as humans are. The flesh is weak. The flesh is carnal and sold under sin and under bondage to this Ea, to Jehovah. But the spiritual son that's within us was put there by our Father. And that child will be born, and it's going to be a miracle, and it's by promise, and that child is within you. And it's got started all the way back with the story of Enoch and the story of Noah. And so these gods of Egypt were these gods like Thoth. And this is where we get the names of the gods, like Enki or Anki or Enoch or Thoth or Ra, because we are children of Ra, of the El, the soul, the Helios, the sun. We are spiritual children. We are that inner spiritual man that is Christ. But we also have this physical flesh. And this is a battle that's been going down through the ages. Cain and Abel, they fought. And for a while, Cain wins. But in the end, it's going to be the spiritual son who is the real heir. This has been the story. So, the great kings were both carnal and spiritual. That's how mankind is lifted up through the birth of this Christ. Through the virgin birth. A miraculous birth. The inner spiritual man is born. And this can happen to all of us. Any one of us has this seed within us. It remains within us, and we cannot sin, according to 1 John. We cannot sin because we have the inner Christ within us, and that is who we identify with. We don't identify with this Adam, this carnal man. We identify with the spiritual man. Everyone, black, white, red, brown, or green, every human on earth has both the physical and the spiritual. And it's a battle within us. It's a spiritual battle. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they are spiritual, for taking down principalities and powers and dominions. We have that authority in the name of Christ, not in the name of Adam, not with the identity that we assume as human, as weak, as impotent. But we, with the identity of that Christ, can command that mountain to be moved, and it shall be moved. We have that identity. It's within us. Christ is in you. That's the hope of glory. And so, all of the kings and king line, priest line of Egypt, from the city of An, or On, where Joseph became the ruler and married into that line and ruled for 500 years, the line of Amenhotep, or the Amenhotep. In Greek it's Joseph, because we say Joseph. So Joseph went down into Egypt, became the Pharaoh, and he had Amenhotep I, Amenhotep II, Amenhotep III, and then he gave birth to Amenhotep IV by a different woman. He didn't marry his sister. Of course, we talked about that. It wasn't really his sister. It was one of those who was related, closely related, to keep the line pure. But he married a woman named T. And you see, this was a miraculous birth. This was a child that was born, but not like Enoch or Thoth or Isaac, born of promise. But this was something that all of the priests of Egypt did not like. Because remember, they had been worshiping their gods, which, again, it's not idolatry. They weren't worshiping many gods, but they had an understanding of cosmology, an understanding of the universe. Their god was light and took on various forms through Horus, Ra, and all the way around in the astrological chart. And they studied this ancient wisdom and science. And they understood it all. But this child, they understood to be something different. And they did not like it because he brought in what they call monotheism. This is Judaism. This is the beginning of this one God who calls himself, I am Adonai. I am Elohim, all the gods. In one person, he combined all the attributes of the universe. And he gave himself a name to the nameless divine being. And he says, I am. And therefore, everything else I am. And in his pride, he says, I am jealous, and there is no other God but me. You will worship only me. You will not understand how God is spirit. But you will feed me with sacrifices and human sacrifices. And you will wipe man off the face of the earth and murder them, and they will be my slaves. And if you don't obey me and become my slaves and be inferior and worship at my mountain, I'm going to wipe you off the face of the earth. This is the God I am, Jehovah, who claimed to be all, that there was no other God but him. And this was the beginning of the dark night. And so, Akhenaten is the god who worshipped Satan. Atun, the god of the darkness. And he set this god up in around 1300 BC. And from this point forward, the god with the elongated skull, the genetically misformed, began to rule. Now, scholars will tell you that this was the exact same year that Moses existed. Akhenaten is said to have gone into exile out of Egypt with the Midians, exactly like Moses was said to have done. And he was to have led his people out of Egypt. And all the things that Moses did, in the very same years that Moses did them, this is what Akhenaten did. But Akhenaten was not a human, but he was a deformed, elongated skull person, one of the giants, the Nephilim. He was one of the fallen. And he worshipped Aten, Satan. And he created this monotheism that we have today that has been ruling the world since that time. And so, as Jesus said, all those who have come before me are thieves and robbers. So this means then that Moses was not human. Do we have any evidence for that? Yes, we do. Our Bible literally tells us this. First of all, remember, when Moses came off the mountain, he had to veil his face. Now, why do you suppose he had to do that? Because, you see, he looked very, very odd. And he had to veil not only his face, but he veiled all the ancient mysteries in his teachings to confuse and to hide and to veil. And the Apostle Paul says to this day, when the Jews read from the Torah, their minds are veiled from the truth. Because Moses brought the law, but our Lord Jesus brought the truth. Truth is not the law, and the law is not the truth. But it is a veil, a curse even. But the story of Moses, there in the Bible, tells us a lot, if you know where to look. If you look in a concordance or a dictionary or something, they're going to say that Moses had children. They're going to say Gershom. Moses had a son named Gershom and Eliezer. Alright, so Gershom and Eliezer were the children of Moses. Well, if you look in the Hebrew, it doesn't say that at all. It says that Gershom and Eliezer were the children of Moses' wife. It never says that in the Bible. It never says Abraham's children. Abraham had Isaac and Isaac had Jacob. And it doesn't say that Isaac was the child only of Sarah, but it says that Isaac was the son of Abraham. And it does this consistently in the Bible. But in this particular case, it says that Eliezer, Gershom were not the sons of Moses, but they were the sons of Moses' wife. And to top that off, the Bible also says that to give a history of the children of Moses, it says this, and these are the children of Moses and Aaron. And then it goes to explain and give the genealogy of only Aaron. Aaron was Moses' brother. So Aaron then was able to have children, and it names his children. And they took on as their father Aaron and Moses. But they were not the children of Moses. They were the children of Aaron. It never mentions Eliezer or Gershom again, because they were the children of Moses' wife. They were not his children. He never had children. Because we know that these individuals, if Moses was Akhenaten, we know, we've got pictures of him, that he had this elongated skull, he was deformed. And these beings with these elongated skulls, we have done tests today. We have found these Peruvian elongated skull people down here. They've done tests, and they are not human, and they cannot breed with humans. They cannot have children with humans, because they are already a mutation. They are a mutation from some particular beings we call the Anunnaki, who mated with the children of men and produced these mutated versions, which one of which was Moses. This means that Moses' father was not the real father, or was not a human. Now, who was Moses' father? The Bible says his father was Amram. We don't know a lot about Amram from the scriptures, but we have a lot of the Jewish teachings and the Talmud and the Midrash that talks about Amram. And it says that Amram had no sin. He was one of the only people in the Bible that it could be said he had no sin. It was kind of like the Immaculate Conception or whatever. Amram was some kind of a holy man. And then it says that when he did give birth to Moses, his wife, Jochebed, was 130 years old and could not have children. But miraculously, like the virgin birth, boom, she turned young the day she gave birth so that she could have a child. Well, this is only an illustration to explain that the child wasn't really from Jochebed. You see, the word Jochebed, very interesting. See, that bed was kind of jockeyed around, right? And while she was in bed, something miraculous happened in that bed. And so it wasn't her husband that was the father of this child, but this was an alien birth, a deformed, mutated child that could no longer have children with humans on earth, but was to usurp the line. And then the children of Aaron would, from this point forward, be considered the line for this mutated version, the fallen Anunnaki. And they veiled all the teachings, and the line went down this way under these circumstances. But remember, there was another line later on. The line that our Father in heaven preserved. See, because remember, the prophecy was that Judah shall only rule until he who has the right and the scepter shall depart from Judah and then be given to Joseph. Joseph would be the line that would rule the world. Because remember, Joseph was the one that went down into Egypt by providence of our Father in heaven. So that line of Joseph came down to Amenhotep III. But the child that was born that became Moses was not the child of Joseph. Oh, sure, he was called Moses, or Messiah. He was anointed with the crocodile oil. But he was a usurper. He usurped the line of Joseph and enter the god Aten, or Satan, and the veiling of the mysteries and the concealing of the truth. And hence we have the law, which is a curse upon man, which was designed to keep us in slavery. And the law was about slavery. Did you not read in the law, ye who want to be under the law? Did you not read the law? For you see, Jerusalem today, she's in bondage with her children under the law. She is a slave. Do you want to be a slave? Do you want to follow after Moses, the enslaver, whose God is the wrathful God, the God of war, who wants to wipe out, put us all under condemnation? All women are slaves. Everybody's got a caste system, and we're all slaves to each other. And even the highest among us, the Jews, they would be slaves to Jehovah, and they would obey and do everything he said, or they would be wiped off the face of the earth. And in the end, it's genocide for everyone. You see? Because it says in the book of Isaiah, Jehovah's plan, that there will be no man left. That's what it says. He says, I'm going to wipe every man, woman, and child off the face of this earth because you all are worthless. I hate you all. In my wrath I shall murder you all. That's the God Jehovah. That's not our Father in heaven. And so Israel then broke up into two different kingdoms. And the southern kingdom of Judah was ruled over by the king who would be of the line of Judah, and the priesthood through the line of Moses and Levi, through Aaron, through the children of Aaron, because there were no children of Moses. So therefore, the great priesthood of Moses was carried on through his brother Aaron, because he had no children. And so the southern kingdom of Judah, the Jews today, continue to carry on this religion of their father Moses, their God Yahweh, or Aten, an Egyptian god of darkness, or Satan, Aten, Satan. But the northern kingdom of Israel, the 10 tribes, their king was from Joseph, and their religion or their priesthood was from Joseph as well. And these were the Zadokite priesthood. This was the, if the southern tribe worshipped in Jerusalem, at the temple in Jerusalem, and they worshipped Yahweh, the northern tribe, they worshipped at Bethel, the house of El, or the house of God. Beth meaning house, and El is the God of Israel. This is why they're called Israel. Isis, Ra, El. El is the Greek Heliopolis, or Helios, or the sun. And this is the city of the sun. And this is the city of Anu, and this is the city of Anu that Jesus constantly talked about. Or is light and Anu is heaven. His father is the Father of heaven. And this God, El, was worshipped at Bethel. And Elijah set up a priesthood there, a mystery school, the school of the prophets. And so there was a tradition down from Elijah all the way to John the Baptist. John the Baptist wore the same sacred goat hair robe, which was the official garment of the priests of Bethel. And it was not the same garment as the Levites. They wore linen, and they worshipped in the Jerusalem temple in a different place. You see, after Moses, some hundreds of years, a man came along named Solomon, and he wanted to be wise, and our Father in heaven gave him all of this great wisdom. And he built a temple, and that temple's never been found in Israel, but it was found in Egypt at Luxor, and that is the temple of Sol Ammon. And this is the continuing worship of the gods of Egypt, or Ammon, Sol Ammon, from the sun to the moon, from the beginning to the end. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the true priesthood that came down to us through Solomon and through the 10 tribes in the northern kingdom, carrying on the line of Joseph. And this was the line of David, because David's father was Jesse, and Jesse was an Ephraimite. And Ephraim was the son of Joseph. And so David, then, was a true descendant of Joseph. And that was the line through Joseph that was prophesied to rule the entire world. Because Joseph had a dream. There were 12 stalks of grain, and the 11 stalks of grain bowed down and worshiped the stalk of grain that was Joseph. That Joseph would rule over his brethren. And he had another dream about 12 stars, and the 11 stars bowing to the other star. And that star is the star that comes out of Jacob through Joseph, which is Christ. So Christ is the true son of promise, born from our Father, the divine spiritual child that's born on the earth through Joseph, prophesied to come. Why is it then that David was supposed to have been the son of Judah? Was supposed to have been a Jew? Well, he wasn't. Well, because, you see, for a while the Jews would usurp the throne. This is why the prophecy says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah until he who has the legal right. And so, it shall be until he who has the legal right shall come. And then a scepter shall come out of Jacob, and a star shall arise, and that is Jesus. Another prophecy of the descendants of Joseph is this. Joseph's branch, see, that's that tender branch that is the line of the kings. Remember, we read about that in Ezekiel. There was this tender branch that Jehovah was talking about, how was taken to a land of traffic, and he said, shall it prosper? No. He was going to destroy it. He wanted to destroy that ancient tender branch, that line. Remember, Christ is the branch. He is that one prophesied to come through Joseph, that tender branch. And talks about that in Isaiah and in Ezekiel. So the tender branch was Christ. He is the branch that was through Joseph. Because the prophecy there says that Joseph would be a tender branch by a well, by water, and he would sprout up and he would go over the wall and be separate from his brethren. Because you see, Joseph went down into Egypt before the other tribes of Israel. Joseph married into the line of On and became that high priest king line. But it was usurped by Moses. But you see, Judah would only have that scepter for a period of time until he who had the legal right. The one who had the legal right would be a descendant of Joseph through David. However, if you read the book of Ruth, that's why there's an entire book that explains all of this, the book of Ruth. And it explains in there how the children of Joseph who lived in Bethlehem, that's where Christ was born. Bethlehem is a place on the border of Judah and Ephraim. And so there were children of Ephraim there, and there were children of Judah nearby. And there was this, for a long time, all of the kings were born as descendants of Ephraim, but temporarily children of Judah. How does that work? Well, it was a Levirate marriage. You see, Elimelech was a royal seed from the house of Joseph, and his wife Naomi. And they couldn't have children because Elimelech died. So, in order to raise up seed, Naomi went to Ruth and Boaz to raise up seed for her husband Elimelech. Elimelech was the children of Joseph. And so Judah was only temporarily on the throne. And they were there in place because it was the seed of Joseph that was to rule. It was the seed of Elimelech, which was a descendant of Joseph. But since he died, or since that line of kings, the rightful heirs, their line was usurped by death, the children of Judah took over for a little period of time. But you see, the children of Joseph were not going to be born on the earth through the physical way. Christ would be born by a miracle, by a virgin birth. This is the way it always happened. That's also how this line was usurped by Etan, by Akhenaten. So remember, the Jewish people, they rule by means of this priesthood from Aaron, because Moses didn't have any children, because he was a mutated version or an alien mutation that usurped the line through Joseph. Okay, this was prophesied. Our Father in heaven knows all about this. Don't worry, don't get excited. But, you see, our spiritual self was hijacked by this physical carnal self that we've got to overcome. It's all very, very symbolic and very spiritual. This is what's going on. We've been hijacked. Israel, the 12 tribes, represents the entire world, our body. Now, half of our body is carnal and half of it's spiritual. We've got the outside and the inside. And the inside is spiritual, and it's still going to reign supreme. But for a while, we lose sight of the spiritual man within, and he goes to sleep in the boat. And the waves come and the winds rock the boat, and we think we're going to perish. But, we get excited and we say, "Why are you sleeping, Christ?" And he says, "Ye of little faith, I've been in the boat all along. Just wake me up. When I wake up, I'm going to control everything, and I'm going to bring it all to peace. And I'm going to say, winds, be quiet." So then the Jews aren't going to rule anymore, but it's going to be the spiritual man. That's you. You're going to rule. You're going to have dominion like our Father told us to have over this world. So you see, Jesus didn't represent the Jews. There are 12 tribes. And the Jews were actually represented by Judas Iscariot, the traitor. Judas, that is just the Greek way of saying Judah. That's the same word. So Judas represents the Jews who betrayed Christ and sold them for 30 shekels of silver. He sold us all into slavery. And he's betrayed his own people. And this has happened over and over again. When these elongated skulls came to earth, they got people to betray the human race. And they usurped our minds, and they brought us under bondage, and they made laws, and they hindered us, and they've cursed us, and they're in their wrath, they've chased us. And they've deceived us. Because you see, our Father in heaven says you're free. All you got to do is reach down within you. And you have such great potential. You're going to reign. You are the heirs of the world. And you don't need to be deceived. You need to wake up. You need to believe. And through faith, you can overcome. Because greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. Greater is Christ than this ego, than this Yahweh. Satan. Greater is Christ. Much greater. Christ is that inner spiritual man that really truly exists, but the flesh, it's just an illusion. The physical world is temporary, the Bible says. Just like the tribe of Judah and their reign through this Levirate marriage, through Boaz, which Boaz was the Jew. Boaz has nothing to do with us. We're raising up the seed of Amalek. The seed of Amalek. The seed of Amalek goes back through Naomi and Amalek back to Joseph. And so Christ is the son by right of Joseph, but in reality by divine miracle. And so just when you think that this physical flesh is going to bring you down, guess what? The Christ will be born within you. So I'm going to go ahead it looks like we've gone over an hour, and I'd like to continue on. I'm going to continue on with this in the next video. We're going to talk about how this carnal flesh has got us in bondage, along with all of the laws of Moses and this administration of error that's going to us because the world has loved darkness rather than light. And so we're going to go into that and understand more about what we can do to become free, literally free, not just, oh yes, someday we're going to become free. No, we've got to be free. We've got to fulfill our destiny. What Jesus told us is something that's real. He said you could move mountains. He said by faith all things are possible. He said we would overcome, and we will. But we've got to know the truth to do that, because the truth will set us free. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it there, friends, and we'll carry this on further in the next video. And you guys have a wonderful day. This is David Vos, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The pharaoh was shown as misshapen, elongated face, breasts, wide hips, swollen thighs. For 1,000 years, the pharaoh had been shown as young, vigorous, well-muscled, ready to go into battle. This pharaoh was shown as misshapen. It was almost as if a creature from another planet had been dropped in the Egyptian desert.